So we wanted to talk a little bit about restraining orders. We wanted to talk a little bit about the process and procedure. We actually have talked about protective orders a lot on the show. Specifically, we've been very critical of gun violence restraining orders. That doesn't mean that there is no place for protective orders. There certainly is. In fact, I've actually had issued a temporary restraining order years ago against somebody who I was afraid of being harassed by. So it's not that we're completely against protective orders. They definitely have their place, but the way that gun violence restraining orders were presented to voters and are being used, we're completely against. That being said, in all kinds of situations, a restraining order may be very appropriate. So Alicia is going to talk about the procedure when it comes to getting a restraining order and some of the things that you may need to know or someone that you know may need to know. So, Alicia, what do you got? What are we talking about?
All right. So as mentioned, restraining orders, I will say that I recently have had an incident to where I've had to kind of go through this process myself. And I thought it was a learning opportunity for me. And I felt that it was an important opportunity to then be able to pass on some information from what I learned through this that might be able to then help somebody else. As far as restraining orders go, there's a variety of different categories of types of restraining orders. And let's talk about those first, because the very first question that was asked when I went into request was, well, what type do you want? I didn't know what my options were. So first of all, there is a domestic violence restraining order, right? That's pretty self-explanatory. That's going to be a restraining order that's requested against, for example, a spouse, an ex, a blood relative, someone within the home, something with that intimate relationship. There's also a civil harassment, which in my case, which is what I ended up having to file. A civil harassment is against someone that you have no intimate relationship with. It could be a neighbor, it could be a stranger, it could be a friend, but someone that you don't have an intimate, close relationship or in-home living situation. There's also a work violence restraining order, and that's one that would be filed essentially by an employer and is put in or requested for a purpose to keep employees safe. There also, lastly, is an elder or dependent abuse restraining order, and that's going to be issued on behalf of someone who is either 65 plus independent care, or even someone under 65 but is a legal dependent needing care. It can be requested by someone who has a caretaker with a power of attorney, for example. So those are primarily your categories of restraining orders that you can request and go into and get. The paperwork is different.
So the paperwork, so the application is actually different.
Applications different. And the location that you file them can be different too, depending on what you're doing.
Interesting. But it doesn't sound like the results are different. It's still some kind of order saying that a specific person has to stay away from it. I'm wondering if, because I looked into this a little bit, it is interesting. There's so many different types. And I think it's really just a matter of, this year they passed this law regarding protective orders, and the next year they passed this other law. So they ended up kind of, copying the same thing and just calling it something different. So they apply it to a different situation.
For example, the work violence is one that is a little bit unique and different. For example, your domestic violence, your civil, your elder or dependent. Those restraining orders, if granted, can prevent someone from being able to come within a certain yardage of the requester. It can stop or prevent someone from even being able to reside or stay in the home. It can require them to stay a certain distance away from your workplace, from your vehicle, your school, your kids' school. It's a lot more broad. The workplace violence, however, is simply going to be that they can't come within a certain distance of the location, the employer, the business. So that one's a little bit different. And when you request these, what's important to note is that when you do this paperwork, a couple different things. First of all, I looked at this overwhelming packet that they gave me, and they said I had to complete it. It had to be completed by 3 p.m. because what it is when you complete the packet, you turn it in, it goes immediately to the judge and is heard and is reviewed that day. And the judge makes an immediate decision. They either decide to grant, to deny, or give a partial grant and a partial denial. So it needs to be received by a certain point in the business day to be heard in that same day. And it was a little overwhelming for me. I actually ended up taking the packet and going home and not turning it in that day because I was just overwhelmed. I was unsure. I looked at some of the questions and I thought, I don't want to screw this up. So one other important thing to know is that there's an option for resources that are there. They actually, in many of the places where where you can turn in this paperwork, the different courthouses, there's also legal aid that's there to help you, which I did take advantage of, and it was a wonderful service that they have a separate questionnaire for you, with lots of paperwork involved, right? You answer the questions, you fill out the documents and the forms that they give you, not the packet for the restraining order, but the legal aid then takes your questions on their questionnaire and they help to do the paperwork for you. So it was a great thing lifted, because I will tell you, it was overwhelming to work with those. Obviously some of them are pretty self-explanatory. I can answer those. But there were some that I was not completely sure as to what they were getting at, what they were looking for. I didn't totally understand the spirit of the intent of what they were looking to get.
I mean, the idea of not screwing it up.
It was important.
is very
It was absolutely.
hey,
absolutely.
this is such a major thing,
Right.
and it's so new.
Right.
You don't want to mess this up. Plus the consequences of not having it granted. I'm sure way into it, but it was some kind of free legal advice that they gave me to kind of help walk.
Well, they technically can't give you legal advice, but what they do is they take your answers and they fill them out according to how you answer the questions. And the questions on their paperwork are a lot more everyday person user friendly. And so it was a lot easier for me to kind of navigate through their questionnaire, and they then applied them in the legal forms. And as far as resources to help through this, I learned of even more resources. Yeah. So let me share those with you here in San Diego County. So we have, of course, legal aid that is in existence in many of our courthouses where the restraining order paperwork can be turned in. They're right there on site. Generally note though that their hours are morning until noon or so, thereabouts. They're not there for a full work day handling restraining order requests. They only tend to do them for the earlier part of the day. There's also the Center for Community Solutions. They will also provide you assistance and help with this. There's San Diego County YMCA as well as Becky's House. There's the Family Justice Center. There's also an organization called San Diego Volunteer Lawyer Program. And there's also a website called thehotline.org. That's also a great resource. So those are some great resources that will help you to complete the paperwork, to do the legal part and help hold your hand through the process. I'll tell you, depending on what you are requesting and what you're needing protection from, it can be a very traumatic thing. And then yet to have to look at this daunting stack of paperwork. I imagine there's some people that just walk away and say, I can't even bring myself to do it. It's too much. So resources are out there.
Okay. So step one was go to the courthouse.
Yes, but you also note that their domestic violence restraining orders actually can't even be initiated and actually started online. That from what I was told, the civil, the elderly, and the workplace all have to be initiated in person.
In person. Okay, so go to the courthouse. Possibly, depending on the type, you may be able to do online. But go to the courthouse. Okay. Step two is they give you this application,
and it's going to be a 2-part application. You'll get a nice thick stack, and you'll get a thinner stack of paperwork, and it's very redundant. But it has it basically has to divide the same information in 2 different places, so you'll fill it out redundantly.
Great. And if you get it in by 3:00, it could be issued that day. But there is help. There is help. There is an advisory group that'll say, "Hey, we'll at least help you complete this." Okay, so now you've got it complete. So you went there, you got the application, you got the help, you completed it. And what's the next step?
Well, by the way, as far as completing, a couple things, you need to go in with as much information on the person that you're requesting a restraining order against as you can get, right? Their age, or at least the estimate of their age, their race, their height, their weight, their eye color, their hair color, their address, their phone number, any information that you can get on them, you'll need to include that on that form. Now, if you don't have all the information, if you're talking about, age, eye color, things like that, they'll ask you to do your best guess. But give as much contact info as you can. They really need that information to help later, because the restraining order, if granted by the judge, will be temporary at first, and then there will need to be a service of the restraining order to the person. So they need to be able to find this person, get in contact with them. So come prepared with as much as you can get on that person. And another thing on the paperwork, it will ask for your address several times. There's a couple different places where they're going to ask you to put it. One really important thing to note is that you never, at least I would recommend, and it's been advised, that you never give your home address. They do allow you to give a mailing address. And note that there is actually a program in place where they have a safe program to where you can actually be issued through the restraining order process a fake address that you use in the legal paperwork that will then forward all government issued or sent mail to your actually true proper homes. Because what it is the address that you put on there for you will be disclosed to the person that you're requesting an order against. So
That's an important,
yes,
important point.
absolutely. And there's going to be questions on these packets. Were you injured or hurt? Okay. And that was one of the questions that I struggled with answering because in my circumstance, I didn't have a physical injury. So, but nope, it's not just about physical injury.
Yeah. So I was going to say, to explain why, like, why would that be a difficult? It seems pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about a situation where it may, or, why would that be a difficult question?
So, I mean, you can think about it. There's all different types of reasons why someone might be requesting a restraining order. This could be someone that's been harassing or threatening, or you feel it is a physical risk or injury. It could be someone that is maybe at risk of like a sexual assault or something like that. And there are times to where the trauma and the injury could be emotional, right? And that does count. So you don't be afraid to disclose the truth. And it doesn't have to be physical injury. You don't have to have marks and things to have some type of trauma or injury. And if you have pictures, by the way, if you have emails, you have text messages, you have photographs of anything that could be of evidentiary value and help with your case, you will want to include that with this packet. I was able to send through email screenshots of text messages and different things to this legal aid person that was helping me, and they were able to print it out and include it. So bring that and be ready with that. Now, when the judge reviews your request, again, they get to decide, do we grant, do we deny, or do we do a partial? If they decide to grant that temporary restraining order, it is temporary, right? TRO, it's temporary. It'll be valid anywhere from 20 to 25 days, depending on the timing, because what it is it's temporary pending a hearing in court.
So after you turn it in, you've prepared the packet, you got the assistants, and they said, hey, here's how you include things like, screenshots,
correct,
that sort of thing. You turn it in, and then they actually turn it, they say, hey, hang out, wait here.
Not really. They say, here's your packet, here you go. And they point you to the direction of where you go to turn it in. And they'll even walk you over there if you want someone to hold your hand, literally hold your hand, they will do that.
But then you turn it in, and then the person who takes your application says, wait, and we're going to put it in front of a judge.
Get comfy. Yeah.
Because it may take 3-4 hours.
For me, it took about 4 hours to get an answer.
Okay. So then they actually take your packet, put it in front of the judge, and look at it. And what the judge is determining is there enough here to issue a temporary restraining order until the actual hearing? So I think it's important that people know you are going to go to a hearing. You're going to stand in front of a judge. The person that you are referring to in the restraining order, they'll also be there. So you may or may not get a temporary restraining order, which it acts pretty much just like a restraining order, but up until the date of the court.
Correct.
And then the hearing is to see whether or not they're going to do a 2 or a 3 year restraining order.
Generally a 3 or a 5, I guess.
3 to 5. Okay. Right. Okay. So you turn your back in
so once you turn it in, you wait, and they'll call you. They'll call your name, they'll call your name, and they'll let you know, hey, come on over, and they will then let you know in that moment, yes, the judge granted it, they didn't, right? So if the judge grants it, whether it's a full grant or a partial, you then take that packet and you have the choice. It's a choice, not a requirement. That restraining order has to be served for the person to be fully in effect. So they have to be served with it. So what you can do is you can, on site in these courthouses, there's a department where you can take it to where it is then going to be served by the sheriff's department.
So you can decide. At no cost. You can say, hey, you know what? I want the sheriff to make this notification to the person I'm referencing in the restraining order. And they will let them know, hey, you got a court date.
That's right. And they have to be notified, and they have to have been served within 5. So let me back up. When the restraining order was issued, right there on the issued restraining order is a court date. I didn't get to pick it. I wasn't asked. It's a date, and it's assigned to me. The restraining order has to be served, and the notification of the court hearing has to be provided to them within no less than 5 days before the hearing date. So you can choose to have the law enforcement serve that for you, or you can choose to do service in your own fashion. And there's an affidavit that you'll have to have someone complete that they did the service for you.
And you chose to have the sheriff do it.
I did.
And so far, you haven't spent any money, right? No money. No money to file.
Just
No
gas.
money to get, yeah.
Just gas to get downtown.
No money to get the help.
Right.
Now, no money to even serve.
Correct.
Okay, great.
Correct. So that's essentially the process. Now, at that court hearing, I haven't had that hearing yet. I will be going in, and if he shows, he shows. And at that point, the judge will decide, is it going to be turned into a permanent restraining order? In my case, it was a civil request that was made. Civil, if granted and made permanent, generally is a 3-year restraining order. If it's more of a domestic, those generally are more like 5, but it is at the discretion of the judge.
Right. Can I tell you what happened in my court hearing? Because I actually did.
Yeah.
This was a long time ago. I actually worked for a bank, and it was a former employee. Their husband actually came and threatened me at the bank because the former employee was showing up at the bank and soliciting our customers. And I said, hey, look, you can't do that. You need to leave. And she flipped out. And then her husband came and threatened me a few days later. Her husband happened to be in law enforcement, and he was actually dressed in some kind of weird law enforcement uniform when he showed up. Anyway, at the hearing, he had an attorney. He was there, and the judge basically said, all right, tell your story. And then the other person, the law enforcement guy, his attorney, basically made the claim. He said, well, really what's happening here is this guy, meaning me, was trying to get an unfair business advantage over my client's spouse, and that's why they're filing this. And the judge looked at me and said, what do you have to say? And I said, Judge, I don't know what unfair business advantage I would have over her if her husband was no longer allowed to come to my workplace and threaten me with violence. And the judge actually started laughing. Mm-hmm. And long story short is the judge said, look, he said, look, I can't issue this restraining order because he hasn't shown a pattern. There was one incident. It was bad, but it was just one incident. And then he turned to the guy and said, actually, then he told me, he said, here's my personal phone number for the phone on my desk. This is before cell phones. And he said, you call me if you ever see him ever again. And then he turned to the guy and said, you're in law enforcement. This could completely destroy your entire career. You know better, or at least you should. Right. Stay away from him. I'm not issuing the order, but you're lucky. So that was my experience. Mm-hmm. I'm sure, the judge is going to make a judgment, and right. They're going to figure out like, hey, is this, maybe he'll rely on, is this a pattern? Maybe he'll rely on severity, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. But at the end of that, had he issued, it would have been 3 or 5 years, right? There's a 3 or a 5 year.
Generally, from what I was told is that generally civil is going to be 3.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have for people that are in a situation where they're not sure if they should request a restraining order?
So a couple things. I know, Mike, you and I talked about this before I went down, because I will tell you, I will tell you as the person that's on this side of it, which I've never been before, I was a little unsure. Should I, shouldn't I? There was a lot of things that I was kind of throwing around and considering. So a couple different things. One is, in case you're curious, clear up really briefly want to mention, you do not have to have a police report or a police case in order to be able to file a restraining order. However, if you do, please have that information, the report number, and as part of your paperwork. As far as what helped me to kind of why did I decide to proceed the way that I did, I will tell you that one incident occurred. I'll share a little bit, but I kind of had a freeze. I know we talk about fight, flight, freeze, right? I had a bit of a freeze, and that freeze for me, it took me some time before I kind of woke up to, wait a minute, this was not okay, right? Not only was this not okay, it was not okay for me. It was not okay for others who've been in my spot, which is very likely if I don't be the one to step up and see something and do something. The balls on the guy to do what he did. If he had the lack of judgment to do what he did once or twice, I had no reason to believe he wouldn't do it again. And so I thought, when I realized this is something I have to do. I have to follow through, and I got to do it. And that's where we're at.
Well, I remember one of the things, if you're thinking to yourself, mm-hmm. I'm being harassed, or someone is harassing me, mm-hmm. Someone is causing you some kind of, you're worried about their actions or their potential future actions,
Right.
and you're not sure whether or not you should file. What the procedure that was just described, there are a lot of checks. I mean, frankly, you go to you first have to file out an application. The application asks you pertinent information.
It does.
That's one check.
Yep.
And then going and getting help. That in itself is it's another check. But then it goes in front of a judge before there's any kind of official action. And if you're worried, like, gee, I don't know if this rises to the occasion of a restraining order,
Which is exactly what went through my head.
put that information in front of a judge, and that judge will tell you whether or not. So if you're worried, it kind of takes the responsibility off of you. All you have to do is describe the situation.
Correct.
The judge will take a look at what you wrote, what was prepared, and you got help. And then the judge will let you know, hey, you know what? This doesn't rise to the standard of doing a temporary restraining order. Then there's no harm, no foul.
Right.
No one's notified. You don't get judged. You don't get, nothing like that. So I would say if you're someone who's worried about a situation, if you're on the fence and you're not sure, your safety is extremely important. So if you're thinking about it, then one way to look at it is, hey, I'm just going to give the facts. I'm not going to embellish. I'm not going to over dramatize. I'm just going to give the facts, and then the judge will let me know whether or not this counts as a potential restraining order.
And I'll tell you, I think that if the restraining order possibility is even on your mind, there's a reason. Listen to your gut.
There you go. And then, of course, the final check is, of course, you actually go to court, which is, I'm sure it's scary and intimidating, isn't it?
Right. It is. Oh, it's a little bit to think about. Yeah. But, I'll be fine. And I will tell you one thing about that. This is not available to me. But one great thing that I found in doing a little bit of research, if you are requesting a domestic violence restraining order, it's very unique to this type of restraining order. There's actually an organization and a program here in San Diego County called One Safe Place. And I'm just going to read it to you because that's not the best way to get this information. They will assist with restraining orders, not only with the writing of the paperwork, but they also will provide, they will do the paperwork actually for you, and they will submit it for you, and they will welcome you into their remote courtroom to appear for your hearing. So you can actually sit in their facility and not be in the physical room with the person.
Wow.
Additionally, they provide wraparound service for victims and their families, such as emergency housing, food, clothing, therapy, benefits, eligibility assistance, pet care, and more. So I thought that was a fantastic resource. So, because I can only imagine the trauma that absolutely could go to these severe degrees, especially with the domestic violence thing. That's also a resource that's available.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Great. Great explanation. I think that was all fairly step by step. I think it gave a good rundown of exactly how this is done. Anything else? Anything else you want to add?
The only thing I had is there were some recommendations that were given, and I thought these were great because I don't know that I would have thought of some of these as it's kind of an after action. If a restraining order is issued, what should you or could you do? First of all, one note that you have to carry that packet with you at all times. Like I've got mine right here with me, right? I'm not going to show any pertinent information. That I've got this guy here that is my restraining order. I'm going to keep that with me at all times. Should something occur, I need to be able to present that to law enforcement when I make that call. And also identify and keep in mind a safe place that you could go in case of an emergency. If something were to happen, this person were to show. If you needed to get away from your known locations and your known places, especially if they know where you live or they know where you work or they know where you hang out, identify a safe place that they are not likely to know about that you can go to in case of an emergency. Keep a list of phone numbers handy, whether it be maybe an attorney, loved ones, friends, emergency resources in your area, for example, maybe shelters or, just places and things that should you need it, have those numbers saved and handy and ready. And lastly, the recommendation was to have the suitcase ready, not just for you, but for everyone under your care. Should you need to take off and leave, spur of the moment, and keep it in your car because you may not be able to go home to get it.
And I'm gonna add, if you are a woman and you are in need of some kind of self-defense measure, check out Not Me. Go to notmeca.org and sign up for our organization, our program. We can also help you with resources, but specifically, we can help you with self-defense. Yeah, getting a gun, getting training, getting a carry permit, so that you can effectively defend yourself against an attacker. And then, we can also, certainly aren't experts, but if there is a restraining order question, we can get you resources on that and make sure that we do everything we can to make sure that you're okay. So if you know somebody who is in need of that, but I'd also recommend, if you aren't in need of that, it's better to do it first, and when you don't need it, rather
Get the
than
training.
start thinking about it after you need it.
And something else I'd like to throw out there too, if it's okay.
Sure.
By no means, and you've already put this disclaimer out there. We're not attorneys. We can't, all those things. Absolutely. But I will tell you, if there's anybody out there listening who needs help, you can call. I will say, call not me.
Mhm.
Pass on to Desi. I will hold your hand. And I'll go down to the courthouse with you. I will help you with all that process and hold your hand, and I'll be a friend. Put the offers open to anybody who needs it.
There you go. Awesome job. Alisha, thank you for going over all that. I'm sorry about what you're going through, and I think we're going to talk more about it in a different show.
Okay.
To talk about some specifics. So there you go. That's everything you need to know about restraining orders, specifically in California. Hey, thanks for watching Gun Owners Radio. I hope you loved that clip. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and follow us on social media, and check out our website at gunownersradio.com.